every parent has a unique, important aspect to pour into that child. And I do believe that even though that's part of our Constitution, even though that's part of our deep part of our history in the United States, I think there is a moral aspect to it. When we see, we can see it in the scriptures, we can see it in other areas. You don't even have to be in the scriptures. You can be looking at other aspects of morality, or other cultures. Both those parents have such an important perspective to pour into the children. For it not to be 50-50, there has to be a darn good reason, I think,
All right, Spokane County, America, planet Earth, what's good? This is your boy Codell, and welcome to another episode of the Father's Gospel Podcast. We got a good one today. We got Brandon Casey, who is running as a judicial candidate for Position 8 out here in Spokane County, and we could not be more excited to have him on the show. Mr. Casey, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for allowing me to come on your show, Cody. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, we appreciate you actually taking the time to join us. So we've been sending out a lot of invites to other candidates, and so far it's only been you and Van Winkle, and I think that speaks volumes about you too. So yeah, we definitely appreciate it. Well, let me start off with this. Could you please share with our our audience what your goals are and what you hope to achieve if you are elected as a Superior Court judge for Position 8 out here in Spokane County, particularly in relations to family courts?
Yeah, actually, one of the key things I think needs to be addressed in our court system right now is the fact that our courts are just behind schedule. Well, and actually, it's not even that. The cases that are going into the system, as I kind of indicate, are pretty much level or have dipped since 2020. And what's happened instead is the cases that have been held on by the court system have risen substantially. And I believe it's about 40% increase. And so,
Wow.
yeah, and just to maintain that level. Now, we've had efficiency studies that have been done in our Superior Court by the National Center for State Courts, and our own court has actually acknowledged, there's a lot of this backlog that's occurred. And even though there are more resources today in the court system, it's just not being used effectively and efficiently. And so I really believe that the judges who are being appointed are not necessarily being appointed with the mindset of an efficiency mindset. Running a small business, you have to actually, you're trying to get your cases through as quickly as possible for your clients, because you care about them. And then I also, the types of cases I take oftentimes give me the ability to do what's called a contingency fee, which means I don't get paid until I complete a case, and I only get paid based on how well I do for the client. So over the last 20 years, my habit and practice is, because I'm still paying staff the whole time, I'm still paying for the rent, staff, leasing the equipment, everything else, often paying for experts until, and then I get paid back at the end of the case. But that puts a pressure on me to make sure I'm moving this forward as quickly as possible to make sure it gets done. And the biggest problem I have is the court system. And so I'm going to give you some examples. One is the fact that we have, as part of our Constitution, Article 1, Section 10 says all cases must be handled without unnecessary delay. So we put time standards to define what unnecessary delay is. In Washington, that means a family law case should be completed. 100% of family law cases should be completed within 18 months. And I think any person who's had to go through a family law issue, custody issue, we understand 18 months is a long time.
I'm on 6 years. So it's, yeah. And
yeah. Yep. And that's not unusual. I hear that a lot. And one of the problems is, I think about young children, especially 18 months is a lifetime for them,
right.
Because they see the world in dog years, not, adult years. And so 18 months is a long time for them. the difference between being a toddler to now they're in first grade, oftentimes that, that's a huge developmental time period. And if that conflict is occurring, because the longer these cases take in court, to be honest with you, there's a lot more conflict. You see a lot less conflict once the judges come down and actually made some decisions, and hopefully fair decisions at that too. I think that's another issue we need to get down to, is removing some implied biases that we tend to have these biases we walk into in decision making that are based upon our personal experiences. It's not like racial bias or whatever. It's more like, I think that this is the best option because that's the way I think about the world. Well, a judge is supposed to recognize that, set that aside, but I'm not sure that really happens. Especially, I think what I'm hoping is it's going to happen more if judges are elected, but because you have to think about what is the best for this community, because it's the community that said, hey, we want you to actually be justice in our community, right? But with an appointment process, there's a different type of thinking about accountability. At least that's my perception. So I think what we can do though is get judges in there, and honestly had a bunch of attorneys that came to me last fall and said, Brandon, I know you've been trying to get other people to run, but why aren't you going to step up? And I had, I prayed about it. I really, because I didn't want to do it if I didn't feel called to it,
Right.
And I love what I do. I love representing people the way I do right now. And really what it came down to was I did feel like this was something that I should step into. And I kind of after that realized how I probably was not stepping into it because I was worried about certain things that were good worries, but instead I just needed to step forward and make this run. So
get it done. Yeah, no, I love that. And I really like the fact that you've ran your own business, because I honestly believe we need more people in government that actually have experience running businesses, because it seems like whether it's judges, politicians, or whatever, a lot of these people, they've either been in politics their whole entire life and they've never ran businesses. And it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't even see how they can make good decisions when they've never experienced working a regular job or running a business or anything like that. So that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, Washington State, I mean, I know just in general throughout the nation, 90% of custody cases, the mom is awarded full sole custody of the child. And I'm not holding that against the mother, because I honestly believe that's the fault of the courts. And that is definitely an issue that needs to get addressed, because not only are the fathers hurting and the children hurting, it's actually hurting mothers as well, whether some of these mothers realize it or not. So yeah.
Well,
No,
and I think there's some pretty good information out there that actually does say that actually recognizes that young women nowadays want 50-50 custody, and part of the reason behind that is because I think there is well, let me kind of go back to some of those implied biases. I think I'm talking about my generation right now. There was an implied bias that is, I'm my worth as a human being, whether I'm a good parent or bad parent, is whether or not the judge says I get more custody than not. Well, that gets this competition going between the parents to say, hey, I'm going to get more custody or not, instead of really what is the standard, what's in the best interest of the child.
Right. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, for me, my whole goal is to do 50-50 custody, because it's not about me. It's not about the mother. It's about what is in the best interest of the child. And the child needs both parents in their life.
Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly. Yeah. I personally went through a divorce, and fortunately most of my kids were grown up. Only two of them were still in the house. I have 5 boys, and But I'll tell you what, I know that their relationship with their mom is so important, that it was important for me to just set aside anything that might have been, okay, the relationship's broken. We're not going to be able to move forward for the rest of our, we're not going to be able to die together, so to speak,
Right.
but to accept that as quickly as possible, so that my boys realizing their relationship with their mom is really important in their lives.
Oh yeah.
And so things like making sure I'll call them up, hey, Mother's Day is coming up in a month because they're boys. I mean, young men are just, I think we can all acknowledge, as men, we're just not as thoughtful about those things. It's just not where we play, right?
No, I mean, I only started getting good at remembering stuff like that really just these last couple of years. I was awful for a long time. I mean, I just off in my own world doing my own thing, and yeah, I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah. So just, that kind of stuff is now we're focused on what's best for the children, and I think that is actually a great, I think if the courts can encourage that, and I think they can, because there is a little bit of counseling that can occur that comes with court orders. Hey, I'm awarding 50-50 custody because I think both of you have important perspectives to pour into your children's lives. And here's what I'm hoping you might do. I'm hoping you might actually encourage your children's relationships with each other, because
Oh man.
obviously this is
Yeah.
done. And I think that's something courts can do rather than the older approach, which is, okay, I'm judging you, parent, over here as being less of a parent than the other one. When in reality, a lot of times it's about, let's just say that if I had a problem with spanking, which I can't tell you one way or another if I do, but let's say I had a problem with spanking as a judge, and then it's legal to spank, right? So as long
Right.
as you're not leaving bruises or marks, it's legal to spank. And so if as a judge, though, I'm using that as my way of deciding whether you're a better parent or a lesser parent, that is me bringing my perspective, my bias into a judgment that I should not make, and that's something I think really needs to change when it comes to family law,
It
so.
definitely does. I mean, with my case, I think I told you this at the forum. I've got Commissioner High Edward on the FTR audio saying in court that I can't be around my son unless I take the COVID vaccine, wear masks. I've had my political beliefs used against me. I mean, it's been chaos. And to me, that's a clear indication that she's letting her own biases come into the ruling. So I'm sure you can't necessarily comment on that, but yeah, yeah.
I
So,
I cannot comment on that, but I can share with you a frustration I had. I was informed that my clients would not get trials or at least there would be a less likelihood of getting trials if I did not get vaccinated. And so several of us attorneys actually were put in that situation where we had to decide whether or not we were willing to get vaccinated in order, because we have a fiduciary duty to our client. We're supposed to put
right.
their interests above our own. Uh, and so that was very frustrating. And so I can only imagine as a parent, you're put in that that situation as well, where you're being told, hey, you may not be able to see your child, or there's something wrong with you as a parent if you're not going to get vaccinated. I'm not saying my clients are children, but there's that fiduciary relationship that's very similar. And that was very disconcerting for me. I really struggled with it. And
No, me as well. Yeah, I mean, I still haven't took the COVID vaccine to this day, so I feel like all the evidence is coming out on my side. So
well, I can say especially after I saw the evidence that came from the boosters and how much, again, I have young men as my sons are young men, and I saw how much it increased the rate of heart problems with
right.
boosters. I at that point in time was when I was like, okay, it's not beyond just it could be an issue. It's like we see something that is actual risk to young men, and that's where I said, no, we're not going to do that. But
No, good for you. And going back to the whole 50-50 thing, I mean, I don't understand why the courts can't see that if you have two fit parents, 50-50 should be the standard, because beyond just what's best for the kids, you're going to have a healthier society overall when you have stable families. You're going to have less little boys growing into adulthood, going to prison, all that type of stuff. And it blows my mind. So, yeah.
I agree. And I think there's one of the other problems that, I hopefully I can address here is we have issues that so I did a lot of work at the Union Gospel Mission up until 2018, and one of the reasons I stopped at the Union Gospel Mission was this increase in the cases that aren't getting resolved started in 2015. Now I didn't know the statistics because they weren't put out until 2022, but you felt it, you knew it because you were in the system, you could see it, things were happening, and by I think it was June of 2018 was when I was telling the clinic, I don't have time to give right now because I'm working twice as hard to help my clients get their cases through the court system, And what I can say came about from all of that is, of course, my heart, and I've still been supporting New Gospel Mission however I can, but you can see where there are people that worked hard to get into that place of redemption, right?
Right.
They're there. They're there. They have and it's amazing how many different stories I heard with people that were like a vice president at a bank or some kind of manager or whatever. They had a hard time in their life and they just broke apart. They began drinking or whatever, and suddenly they spiraled down. Okay, they then work 2 years. So by the time they get to me, they've already gone through 18 months of the program. We're about trying to get them back on track, get them employed again. Oftentimes my office would pull people in so they get that 8 weeks of employment because they hadn't been employed for years. And so they get some work history and all of that happening. And yet there was still some biases there, and the focus on it being every parent has a unique, important aspect to pour into that child. And I do believe that even though that's part of our Constitution, even though that's part of our deep part of our history in the United States, I think there is a moral aspect to it. When we see, we can see it in the scriptures, we can see it in other areas. You don't even have to be in the scriptures. You can be looking at other aspects of morality, or other cultures. Both those parents have such an important perspective to pour into the children. For it not to be 50-50, there has to be a darn good reason, I think,
Yeah, I mean, for me, the only thing that really should be holding back 50-50, if there's evidence of physical abuse or sexual abuse, beyond that, really, there shouldn't be too many things stopping 50-50 custody from happening. So yeah, it's alarming to me. All right, well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add one more. So one of the things I do still, even though I don't necessarily do as much with Union Gospel Mission or Volunteer Lawyers Association or Volunteer Lawyers Program, I still do free consults for a lot of people, and that could be meeting with them 2 hours. And sometimes it's a lot of follow-ups, but helping them either get to an attorney or giving them some advice. So on, if they're doing a pro se case, and interestingly, this brought across for me this young lady who came in and she had gone through a similar issue that I encountered at the Union Gospel Mission, where really my understanding, without divulging too much, is during COVID people did start drinking a little bit more. That was kind of normal. And so she recognized maybe that was something. Her husband and her were going through a divorce, and she recognized that. So she put herself into a program, and then she finished up her college education and got a job. And then, and so they had a temporary order during that time period while she was going through that process saying, okay, I'll see him once every, once 1 weekend a month, And I think from her perspective, it was, I'm going to sacrifice right now so that I'm going to be in a better place to be 50-50 with my child. And, I didn't know before I did the consult. I asked people, bring in your paperwork. So, because I can't really consult without knowing what's happened in the case and where things need to go. So she brought in the paperwork. It was my opponent, right? And my opponent actually, it was a trial, and that they went through. And it was just two people and happened over 3 days, which was split out over 3 months, which I didn't understand. Why do you need to take 3 months to have everybody testify? That's, to me, that's a waste of time. But and then what happened was the order was issued 3 months later. So the trial ended in January. The final order gets issued in April, you know, and
Wow.
yeah. And so obviously you see some problems with the delay that's occurring there, right? And what the order comes back is that she didn't show that the father was more detrimental. Well, that's not the standard, you know? And it's funny because Judge Pullen cited the correct case law and said this is what's in the best interest of the child. And as she's citing the case law and she had outlined the facts that had been heard at trial, I thought, I'm going to get to this place where I'm hearing 50-50 and I don't know what went off the rails because this woman's in here asking me about it. And I'm thinking maybe she just misunderstood the court's order, right? Because you're reading the facts of what's been heard at trial. I'm reading the case law. I'm like, okay, the logical conclusion right now seems like 50-50. And then suddenly there's this statement of, but she didn't meet the burden of proof of showing that it's more detrimental to be with the father full time than to be with her. Well, that's not the standard. The standard is a default towards, you know, the best interest of the child. Both parents have a good are part of that best interest, you know. So I think it's, you know, I think one of my concerns is anyone who thinks that that bias can only affect men is, you know, pendulum swing, and it could someday really be affecting women far more than it is right now. So we need to create that pendulum to stop right there in the middle and say, this is where it is. Unless a parent is abusive somehow or very neglectful, you know, something that's a problem, a detriment to the child, we go ahead and say both parents are important.
Well, and I love that you say that as far as about the pendulum swinging, because that's something that we make very clear at the here at the Father's Gospel Foundation, as we are on a mission to get 50-50 custody to be the standard. We do not want the pendulum to swing the other way, because we don't want mothers dealing with what so many fathers are having to deal with in the family courts, because again, that's not fixing the situation. It's not benefiting the child, it's not benefiting the family, and it's sure not benefiting society. And so yeah, no, we celebrate, we, you know, we love, protect, and celebrate motherhood as much as we love, protect, and
Oh yeah,
celebrate fatherhood, you know? So
yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah. Well, my next question for you is, what has inspired and motivated you to pursue a judgeship here in Spokane County?
okay. That one is having some clients, too many clients die, is kind of waiting for trial. And
Okay.
actually, when Judge Pullen was appointed in October 2022, I was down in a trial in Walla Walla that the case had started in 2013. I was brought on in January of 2022 to help make sure that case moves forward quickly. It's something that I've had more success at than some other attorneys, and it's just because that's been part of my focus. For example, in August of 2019, I ended up picking up a trial. We tried it by January of 2020. You know, it was a
Okay.
medical trial. So moving cases forward as quick as possible. But the problem has been, you know, going back to those standards, if 100% of cases are to be completed within 18 months, when the trial date gets set out to start with 18 months, you know that's not going to get completed. I mean, we just know that, right? So
Right.
the better way to do this, and this is what I'm always arguing, and is you got to start setting some benchmarks early on in the case. So in that case in 2022, the attorney came in associated on. One of the things we did is down Walla Walla, they don't do case scheduling orders, but we asked for one to make sure that it got tried by September. You know, well, interestingly enough, because we know this kind of stuff happens, the court had some stuff that came up, and then we fought to keep it only continued till October. So that case got done. Why was that important for me to describe? Because the husband in that case had stress-induced Parkinson's from
Mm.
being involved in litigation for that long. It was hard on that family. Their family business had been taken away. The children had realized, where this business is gone. So they moved out of town.
1 second. I think Kyle just arrived. Just a
Okay.
moment. What up, brother? Welcome. Sorry. Oh, you're good, dude. We just started. We're only 2 questions in.
Right on.
All right, Mr. Casey, we are back. So yeah, please continue on.
So I think that is where really over about 5 years ago, I started going to a lot of other attorneys and saying, we need better judges running. And actually it just to kind of give you a background, there's out of the 13 judges that are on the Superior Court right now, 11 have been appointed. So we have a problem also with judges being elected. And I go back to that whole thing of, I think when you're elected, you're out there, you're talking to people, you recognize you're accountable to this community,
Yeah.
get stuff done. When you're appointed by Olympia, and then it's kind of like, do you really feel accountable to who do you feel accountable to? Where did that authority come from?
Well, let's face it. It's a political maneuver, because your political ideas align with mine, and so this is what I want, and it's become an absolutely 100% agree with you that it should be more of a like, I'm against affirmative action. It should be the right person for the right job. And, the intent was, well, we're going to do this and do that. And we're going to cater to these people because we want these folks to come in. And, if you don't agree with this, then you're not liberal. But if you're too strict, then you're conservative. And then, you get put in this box. Well, you shouldn't do that with judges. It should be based on their history as an attorney, because we all know that a lawyer is different than an attorney. A law, he goes to school. An attorney actually practices law.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, like, if that attorney has conducted himself well and he's made those moral, ethical, and legal decisions that probably don't align with his own, but yet he still does his job and he does it through the lens of the Constitution, then these people should be, man or woman, doesn't matter, should be elected for the job or apply for the job. And then there's some kind of ombudsman board that come in here and say, hey, this is the right man or woman for our stuff, versus a governor that comes in and says, you know what, you're duly ordained regardless of your case.
You are the queen, you are the king.
Yeah. So, because you're messing with people's lives as a judge.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people say, oh, well, you can just do this. Like, no, you are messing with people's lives in the end, and it's not that simple.
No,
it's not that easy.
Kyle,
like if I mess up your burger, that you're going to have a bad burger and it's going to ruin you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, you bring up a good point. Is the people out there that are running for judge. When you were talking about the ombudsman committee, really what you have is unfortunately a political or a who do you know who's going to get you in front of the governor type thing. At least that's my perception of it right now. It's one of the reasons I've never wanted to play the game, because I've never wanted to feel beholden to a political person. But what I also have been surprised about is, as I've been getting out and meeting with people and saying, here's the reason I'm running, I think every judge should have a constitutional lens for how they view the law, which I'm not really sure. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a Superior Court judge. This is one of the most powerful judges in the state of Washington, right? Because they're court of original jurisdiction. So they're going to hear pretty much any case that's going to be a constitutional case or have a constitutional issue, or go up to the Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. And the hearings that happen in front of the judge, the Superior Court judge, get reviewed it's not like the Court of Appeals does their own evidence finding. It's they take what the judge provides to them through that hearing and say, hey, we're going to now apply the law and facts, you know. And so on appeal, it's all built based upon what that Superior Court judge does. Well, so I'm getting out there, I'm talking with people, and the biggest thing that people have said is, hey, wait, I thought judges don't have platforms or don't have issues they talk about. Well, not policy issues, you know, that's for the legislature to decide, you know, what types of laws should be passed are for the legislature. How we follow the law, how we make sure the Constitution is being operated in the court system, that's for the judges. And so it's interesting to me because when you have those appointments going on, you now have an electorate, you know, you have the people out there who are not actually knowing what to do, because it's like any muscle, it gets atrophied, and now people don't know what to expect from judges. So I love the fact that you brought up types of things you would expect from a judge. It's just, I wish a lot more people would. I'm hoping for many elections in the future here where there's more people running and more attorneys running, and so that we actually get the people in Spokane County educated as to, yeah, no, I'm selecting somebody. I think I'm really thinking about who I want there on the bench and what kind of person makes a good judge. So
yeah, and a lot of them have, in a sense too, I think what it is, it really is in a sense, it's a popularity contest, but the popularity contest is controlled by a certain group of people.
Right.
Now, they're the minority, but they're the majority as far as who gets pushed this narrative.
They've got the influence, the money, the power.
You know, the Net Pleases, the Rachel Andersons, all these folks. So they're gearing this thing. And so you have two candidates that are coming in, you know, Mr. Van Winkle and Mr. Casey, and they're saying, wait a minute here, we're not doing things from the lens of the Constitution. We're not following these things. And the reason why is, here, I have verifiable experience operating in front of these judges, and you know, they come walking out scratching their head and like, did I just get stupider coming out of that court case? You know, why is this not applied? Why is this not applied? So then you got these two gentlemen are probably going to be the first ones through the wall to breaking that.
Yep.
And they're going to get bloody noses on that. But hopefully fathers like you and I and other people will see, hey, this is going against the system.
Right.
And even though you don't like it, it's like going to the dentist. Nobody likes going to the dentist, getting their tooth pulled, but it's necessary to get it done in order for you to be better health.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing with, you know, court health.
Right.
You have to get the old guard out of there to have these things. And when it becomes, you know, like Lord Acton says, power corrupts, you know, absolutely, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, that's what's going on in the court systems here. And they're in family law. And like, you know, Mr. Casey's saying, that's the highest court. So it supersedes district court, supersedes municipal court, because you're at the superior court level. So
Right.
you have more of an impact overall in the whole state of Washington versus just in the city. Because whatever case precedence happens or that's done in Spokane is going to affect everybody.
Right.
You just have to know to come back. But that's one judge. And if that judge is wrong, then it affects everybody wrongly.
And I honestly don't even, I don't think most citizens even realize how big of an impact, you know, your local judges have on your everyday life. So, I mean,
yeah, it's kind of the same. I saw it in the federal building and I like to do it. As a Marine, I didn't get to have that. The only thing I distinguished was black and white. What's a lawful order? What's an unlawful order? I didn't have any deviation from that.
Right.
And so I still like that fit with my mindset still as a human being too. What's right? What's wrong? And I think that these two gentlemen that are running for it have that thing, but they still have the ability to say, okay, this is not right.
Right.
Let me research this, and I'm going to do my due diligence, and I'm going to lawyer and I'm going to attorney this thing as a judge. Does that mean that they know everything? Absolutely not. But we have to give them that leverage to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Where it has become, again, back to Mr. Van Winkle, what we were talking about, is like, now you have the dog walking the owner instead of the owner walking the dog.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to come there. If you have a grievance, you know, you get to redress it with your government. Well, who are those first people? Well, that'll be Mr. Casey when we come to this in his court form. Meaning you not specifically now because you can't hear our cases, but but
Sacrifice for the greater good.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And so the thing is that, you know, we need more men, more women like this with that mentality of like, hey, this is wrong. This is what's going on in our court systems.
Yeah.
And so it scares me because, you know, where the law ends, tyranny begins. And I think that that's what is happening right now in Spokane Superior Court. But now you got these two gentlemen coming in and they don't like it. So then that's why you have just, what was it, Saturday or Friday that they wrote that article against Mr. Casey?
Yeah,
Oh,
they did a little
yes.
smear campaign on you, and yeah, they definitely don't like you and Van Winkle. And I mean, I've got a philosophy. Anytime I see the system attacking someone, I'm like, all right, they probably are doing something right.
Yeah.
So let me do some more research and see what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that article. So, by the way, that client. Well, it gets some things wrong in that article. Well, no, I should say some things. The whole bent of the article is wrong, but it also leaves a whole lot of stuff out, and that's how it bends it. But what's interesting is that client. I encouraged her to sue me because my insurance company wasn't stepping up and taking responsibility. It's my office, so my employees, they're an extension of me, you know. So that was my fault, and you know, it wasn't something I wanted. Obviously, you know, that was, but you know, so she, by the way, we're actually really good friends. We had a mediation to get her case settled October 7th. We went out for dinner afterwards, you know, and
Nice.
so the newspaper, I think the reporter, when she called up, she's like, well, she can't be friendly because she's suing you. I'm like, no, give her a call, you know. And then the reporter after that was not going to call her. So I called Lisa and said, hey, can you give the reporter a call? So she actually had to talk to her. You know, the
It
court of,
deviates from their perception. So they
Yeah.
don't want it to be
Yeah.
right. They want it to be adversarial against you rather than, hey, you know, you can't agree to disagree,
Right.
but still be friends.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not fitting the narrative that they want to push out there.
Oh, I know. Well, it's interesting to me because the Judge Fearing is the one who wrote that opinion that denied, or you know, that upheld the denial of the vacating of the order, right? And he's endorsing me. He has been endorsing me throughout this whole time period. So it's like, in the Court of Appeals actually said, hey, we applaud Mr. Casey for being honest and forthright about this stuff, you know. And yeah, people are going to make mistakes, but at the same time, it's what you do when that happens, you know.
Right.
And you know that now it's interesting, that quote that she has in there is that I said this is what's wrong with the system. That's true, but what I was talking about is in that particular case, the judge who actually him and his firm were the ones who did the LLC agreement for the clinic we were suing, made decisions to like dismiss multiple parts of that case, even up till February 2019, which was a couple months before the trial. And then the defense counsel put in a notice of conflict to trial date. And then we end up going in to find out when the new trial is going to be set. And the judge says, well, you have to come to an agreement with defense counsel. I'm not going to just set it. And so that's why the trial date didn't get reset. Then COVID comes along and then everything's suspended. And then all of a sudden, when the suspension gets lifted in July, we're a year out from that, you know. And so that's how the notice comes in. And I, to be honest, I wish that he would have just set a new trial date back in 2019, but he instead insisted, no, we have to come to an agreement. I'm like, court, you need to just do your job, you know.
Right.
And that happens unfortunately in some of the smaller counties. Now in Washington, or in Spokane County, we do case scheduling orders, which I really like because it sets those benchmarks early. The issue is, are the judges going to actually follow, trying to make sure 90% of their cases are within a year or less? But if you're setting them already so just last April, so there's a statute that says you can have expedited cases if your client is over the age of 70 and they're frail, right? So I come in with the evidence, have the hearing, the judge goes through everything and sets it a year and a half out, you know. And I'm like, wait, I want this trial in November, and defense counsel has said he's got 2 weeks in November. It's a 1 week trial. Let's get it done. And defense counsel was like, well, but that's 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I don't think it's fair to my client that I have to try a case 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, you know? And I'm like, seriously? You're dealing with people's lives here, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to Cody, you were asking what motivates me to do this. Is that
Yeah.
that's what's motivating me right now is I can't, I've done everything I can as a lawyer to try to make sure this justice is occurring. And it's just not, there's nothing more I can do from this. Not nothing. This fight is, it's like, what do? You know, you can try to fight it, but it doesn't, you're up.
I mean, I feel like that's what's going on all over the country. It's the old guard versus the new guard right now,
Yeah.
and we're just chipping away at it. And it's like we're bringing change, whether you guys like it or not. So,
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it you know, like when that happens, and the same thing with you, Mr. Casey, is like, if it's important to you, I don't care if it's the day of Christmas. Like my children, I'm fighting for my kids and dealing with this silver bullet of
Right.
false allegations to them, because I'm looking at it like, why don't these judges see that pretty much a lot of what, I mean, because it's this victim card that they claim against men because they know it's going to work, and
Right.
it's worked since 1979. Oh, hey, this is how it's going to go. So it's done it in evolutions, and now you're getting to this court where you see this. You know, like some of these attorneys that say there's 110 protection orders per week in Spokane County Court. At that rate, every man in Spokane County is going to have a protection order against him.
It's crazy.
I mean, that's not like a very far out statement. It's darn near going to happen, you know, because he looked at a woman wrong.
Right.
But fact of the matter is, like, if the case is important and it should be done and they should found it, they shouldn't have, it's like this. Since this new course of control law, you can have hearsay. Well, the judges still aren't looking at this because there still has to be standards for hearsay.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just have rumors and whatever else. There has to be some kind of a documentation as to where somebody made a declaration for you. But that's, judges are not, they're saying, well, it's my discretion. Where in the Constitution does it say that you have discretionary powers to inflict on anybody else, you know,
Right.
and ignoring constitutional law?
And I know that's been your whole case. My whole case has been all hearsay. And I mean, it's just, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, but
So
they push it back and
frustrating.
they're like, hey, this is going to happen. I don't care.
Yeah.
If it happens on December 25th, those are my children. I don't want my children back. I will go to court on December 25th.
Happily.
Whatever. Yeah.
Happily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I think one of the key things that you're bringing up that a lot of people don't realize, in fact, there's a quote on my website that comes from Justice Jackson, you know, who's one of my heroes, but he talks about the fact that most people assume, well, if you learn the law, everybody's going through schooling and they're learning the law, you know, and oh, it must get applied the same, you know. And he points out, no, it's actually this discretion of the judges is what people should be looking at when they're voting for judge. How are they looking at each law and application law through the lens of the Constitution? How are they going to operate in that discretion? Because believe it or not, discretion is one of the biggest things that judges use. And it's one of the hardest things to overturn on appeal, which is, you know, the standard is essentially no other judge would possibly do this. You know, that's how the Court of Appeals is looking at that. Well, that's a problem, you know, because that's a very broad range for discretion. So that's where the county gets to pick what kind of discretionary judge they're going to have versus having Olympia, you know. Because if we really look at it statistically, the governor is picked by 4 counties, right? That means 4 counties are essentially picking 75% of our judges across Washington, you know, by appointments. So does the perspective in those 4 counties, you know, King County being one of those, is that really the type of discretion we want used here in Spokane County? Well, that comes to the voters. You know, we have to step up as voters and say, here's who we actually want on the bench. And that also requires the judges to get out and meet those people, which I think is an important factor. I've been very surprised by how many people are, oh, you're actually willing to talk to me. You're actually willing to be out here talking with us and everything. And, you know, we go into these forums and I'm surprised by how often there's this, well, I can't talk about that. I can't talk. Well, there are things that we can't talk about, but out of that, I can still talk about principles I'm going to apply so that you get to judge me on how I judge quick cases, you know.
Well, I know for me, like with the forms, I've been surprised how easy it is to get some of these people to expose themselves when you just ask them the right questions. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Poland exposed herself, Anderson exposed himself, and it wasn't even that hard. I
Well,
mean,
Tennessee for that matter, because that's what he's telling the people when you don't show up like that is like, well, I don't care what you think. It's just the people that are in power that are going to put me back on the bench.
right,
And then you think about it, Poland and Anderson, all the ones that were pulling for, between Tennessee and Van Winkle, all of them dipped out. Sharsh, he's no longer there. So now what are they doing? Now they're sitting there jumping on Tennessee's bandwagon. And the same thing here with, Mr. Casey and Pullen. So it's this whole thing. Eventually, I mean, Rachel Anderson writes this thing for, they're just kind of, lack of a better term, that, they're just stroking each other's self, hey, you got a massage for me, I'm gonna give you a massage, like,
Right.
hey, we're gonna do this stuff because we want the gravy train to continue. But when
Keep
you got
going.
Casey coming in and saying, hey, this has got to stop, and
Yeah.
nobody likes to hear that.
Yeah. No, they definitely don't like to hear
Yeah.
what you and Van Winkle have to say. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just outside, I mean, I hate to say it, but, and I don't think it's an ignorant thing to say, but you have a lot of attorneys that are here in Spokane that have the same path.
Right.
They live here, they've gone to Gonzaga, they're in with the good old boys network, and they're back in there. So they exchange it. Oh, don't worry, and then go out drinking later. I get if you're going to talk about the case, but if you're getting someone from the same pool, that's just incest. You know what I
Right.
mean, so when you got the other attorneys that come out, say like U of I law or California or Oregon or something like that coming in, they don't like that.
Well, and from a financial standpoint, why would they want the system to change? If 50-50 started becoming a normal routine, all of a sudden, all the money they're making through divorce cases, custody cases is going to go way down because they can't keep the conflict going. And yeah, they definitely don't want that gravy train to end.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, from Mr. Casey's perspective too, that's not his, he said it straight up. And that's what I admire about him, because he was straight up and said, okay, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm going to try to fix it.
Right.
And at the same time, he's like, I'm not really sure about this family law stuff, but I'm going to, check it out and pay attention to him more.
Yeah.
So if you're having a person that's going to do that and is trying to apply for being a judge, wouldn't you want that person in there versus the person that says, oh, well, case by case situation, and completely forget the overall, underlying thing to what family law is about, and then what, most of the superior court cases are, because I guarantee you probably 50 to 60% of that is family law.
Right.
And the other stuff are protection orders.
Right. Right. Well, and I'm with you, Mr. Casey. I mean, I was just so impressed how you weren't afraid to talk about the bias that's going on in the courts, and your passion for the Constitution, because that just seems to be something, in my experience, most judges like to ignore and not talk about. So yeah, really appreciated that. All right, my next question for you is, can you discuss some specific issues that believe need to be addressed and resolved in the operation of the family courts?
That one I probably need to look more into, but here's off the top of my head some of the stuff I think can be helpful. I have not handled a lot of family law cases directly. I've only handled a few. Most of it's been consulting with people about decisions they have or narrowing the issues, so that, because there's a lot of people that have a hard time finding a family law lawyer because their life feels like it's been in a blender, and it looks, so they come into a family law lawyer who might have a tight packed schedule, and now it looks like this mess, and a lawyer's like, I don't have time nor want that, and especially if that person's on a limited budget, it's like, I'm not going to get that done for them on a limited budget. So a lot of times what I'll do is help kind of narrow the, here's the issue that you're trying to get down to is, you want 50-50 custody. Okay, you're going to want to put some of this other stuff aside when it comes to the possession. How are you going to dispose with that? Or here's what you might, so a lot of it's consulting is what I do. But what I've experienced in the family law court, on the cases I have taken through there, which again, I'm really trying to be clear, it's been a handful, it's been kind of pro bono situations where somebody's really needed somebody, and oftentimes until they can get to a point where they can hire a lawyer, or the organization that helped me get in there has somehow built up some money to hire a lawyer for this person, and so what I have found is a disorganization at the lower level, like how it handles through commissioners. I'm sure you guys have experienced this too. Show up to just spend a couple hours there to figure out if your case is going to get called, and then by the nodding the heads, I'm getting the idea. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. That's a waste of time. And when you're talking about most people, they don't have that time to waste. Now, as I'm sitting there wasting my time, I'm thinking, if I was getting paid hourly, this is pretty great, because the courts consider my hourly rate to be 400. Actually, I think it's now up to $450 an hour is what's approved. That's great for me if I'm sitting there waiting a couple hours, because just ching, to put that on the bill. But for the average person that's like, I'm taking time away from work, that's not a good thing. And then, with employers, that gets to be frustrating. And so, a person starts to feel like their employer might not be on their side anymore, and yet they're feeling like they're fighting for the child's, time with their child. That experience, I think, can be focusing the resources specifically with regards to the administration of that process, I think is going to make a big difference. And so really looking at that, which, to be honest, I'm looking from an outsider looking in perspective. I want to get a chance to see it from the inside and say, okay, what's the reasoning here for the way this is running? Because it does not look efficient to me. And in my office, what I do is, when I run into inefficiencies that are occurring, I get in there and I have what I call accountability meetings. Accountability meetings aren't like, you screwed up, now we need to, it's about, okay, we're not achieving the goal that we want to achieve. What's happening here? What's going wrong? What are the barriers to us achieving this? Now we're going to actually account for those, and we're going to say, here's what we're going to do to measurably change that. What tends to happen a lot of times, and this is the interesting part for me, is somebody somewhere along the lines thought they could save themselves a little bit of time with a shortcut. And that shortcut starts to take its own course of action. And pretty soon, one of my departments is actually off track, and I'm like, wait, guys, this is the reason we have the process, And so I think there's those kinds of things behind the scenes that we could deal with. And I think that's one of the reasons commissioners have said, you guys keep on asking for more money and more people. But it hasn't gotten better since when we've been doing that. So yeah, we're saying no until you come to us with a real plan. So that's going to be one of my first steps, to really talk to and find out. And fortunately, I've gotten actually a lot of encouragement. Hey, when you make it up on the bench, would you come talk to me? Let's find out what's going on, and I'm going to give you, it's not in the family law area, but in one other area, like the POs, the parole officers. I've had some of them say, yeah, no, the judges don't even ask them, how it affects them when they're making decisions, and they're having these problems. And when they try to get time with the judge to talk to them about it, we're not talking about issues on a particular case. We're talking about how it plays out when the judge writes the orders, Or another issue is I had a couple of doctors from Eastern State Hospital say, well, I'll vote for you, but as long as you make sure that when you do when the orders get written, that it actually says, yeah, this person might have this medication, but they actually have to take their medication. I'm like, that's happening to you? Why would you have somebody out at Eastern State Hospital and not give the doctors the authority to actually administer the medication? That doesn't make it, that's not going to get that person better, right? I think a lot of it, and you look at that Center for State Courts report, and they didn't come up with a new plan. They basically said, hey, if you start looking at a lot of things that we recommended in 2019 should address X, Y, and Z. Once you get those in place, let's do phase 2 where we're actually seeing how successful it is, So that's kind of, I hope that answered the question, but as far as
definitely did. Yeah.
Okay.
It does, because here's the thing. They cut corners and just not necessarily like what he was intimating. He was just straight out saying it. they cut corners, and then that becomes a standard. So that's what
Right.
they've done at the court. They cut corners. As you go into somebody like that, well, cut corners, and you teach somebody like that, then the next person is going to continue it on, and then they're just going to find corners to cut on that. That's why you always hire at least two lazy people if you have a business, because they can find the shortest, smallest route to that. That's why they're valuable to you, because you find the two laziest person to do something.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in the court system. You find these people and they're lazy, but they don't do policy and procedures. Here's the standard. Don't deviate from that standard, and this is how it's done, and this is how it should be.
Right.
And then the same thing along those lines is, and I'm not sure, taking this from Eric, one of Eric's thing, he said that the judges, when they are in there, they get $212,000 base salary. Whatever the salary is, it's got to be over at least 100,000, right? So I didn't get that as a Marine, but I was a Marine 24/7, 365.
Right.
So I didn't just sit there and work banker's hours from 9 to 5. I'm not a Marine now. I always had to provide protection and all this other stuff, security, because that's the job in life I chose. Well, the same thing with a judge. If they're not doing their job and they're not coming into these parole officers, probation officers, and doing it, taking their time and doing stuff Saturdays and Sundays, it's like, you know what, judge, you chose that life.
Right.
So then that means you need to sit there and make your community better. Well, how do you do that? Well, you listen to everybody that's involved. You bring them in. It might be overtime for them, but not for you. If you believe in the United States and you believe this stuff, then, and you have uphold and defend the Constitution, then that's what you're going to do it. Like, no, I worked 12 hours yesterday. Well,
like you said, they chose that job. Yeah, they chose to do it.
You chose that life. If you're not
Right.
willing to provide your life for that job, then you have no business being in there ruling over somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't fit in my lunch hour, 12 o'clock. Oh, hey guys, we got to take a break. We need to go to lunch and eat. Unless you got some diabetic thing, then you probably shouldn't be up on that bench. You know what I mean? Like, because you're worried about chow.
Right.
Because that's all you're thinking about right there when I'm dealing with somebody's life or kids or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's
hold
crazy.
on to that thought. I know, dad, whatever, you haven't seen your kids in 2 years. I need to eat this cheeseburger.
Right. Right.
I'm hungry.
Yeah. That's what it kind of feels like a lot of times. Yeah.
But there is that accountability that they don't, again, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, okay. So my next question for you is, what kind of support have you received from individuals, organizations, and the community? And how has it influenced your perspective on the functioning of the family courts?
Well, I guess it's been humbling, the amount of support I've received. I was told early on that this was going to be a huge uphill battle, that it was very unlikely to win, especially if I was running against a female. That was a little bit discouraging, because I come from a perspective that gender is not really the basis that we get judged on. I think we should be judging people on their merits and what they do, and what they're planning on doing. And a meritocracy is kind of how I see it, instead of having a some kind of gender-based approach. So all of that was very discouraging. However, the support I've received has been amazing. Part of that, you can see, I don't get a chance to see who donates, or, well, I guess technically I could look at the PDC disclosures, but the whole purpose of the rule is so we're not thinking about that if we're ever on the bench, right? So I choose to actually not even look at the PDC disclosure as to who donated or how much or whatever, but we don't get to know that up front. But from what I understand, knowing how many people have donated and how much has been donated has been very humbling. And it's interesting when you say from the family law perspective, I've been in the midst of meeting people from all parts of the community. And I'll tell you, family law is not constrained. You talk about Eric, right? A businessman, right? And so I might be meeting with him on an issue that is, business law related. How am I going to be operating as a judge constitutionally when we're looking at business law issues or property right issues? And yet everyone's got a story to tell. In fact, I was at the Cattlemen's association meeting. They're nonpartisan, but they allow candidates to come in and talk about, hey, this is what you're planning on doing. Interestingly enough, they apparently had never had judges there before, because judges apparently don't think that's important to do, and they were a little surprised that we could actually talk to them. And we're like, yeah, no, there's actual issues that the court deals with, and you need to know what our perspectives are, what our principles are, so that you can know whether or not to vote for judge. Well, I had one lady who said, oh my gosh, what you're talking about with my case not getting, she said, just last week I was told my trial, it's a child custody issue. And she's like, yeah, I was just told that the trial's getting continued for a year out. And I was like, oh my gosh, and she said, I didn't even know about it, didn't even hear about it until they just called me, and it was supposed to happen a few days. I think she found out on a Wednesday, and it was supposed to start on a Monday or something like that. And it was just like, so of course her life is upended. I hear that so often, Now I've gotten a chance to really experience family law issues, both personally myself, and I was very fortunate because if this tells you anything, my wife is a family law lawyer, right? And focuses on dissolution, that kind of stuff. Because there's different types of family law lawyers, that some of them focus on like other issues, but and then my limited experience, we both knew not having the case drug out was the most important factor for us and our kids. So if that tells you anything, two lawyers, we chose to file in Lincoln County to try to make it as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's an indictment to our county, right?
Yes,
and we made choices to move that through as quickly as possible. So that experience, I think, bringing that to the bench of saying, this is it. What if I'm thinking what's good for these clients and not necessarily what's good for their lawyers, I'm going to be thinking, how do I help this resolution occur as quickly as possible,
Right.
and move that along. So
that speaks volumes about you and your ex-wife, that you guys were able to keep that conflict out. So good for both of you. I love that.
Well, you have to be, I mean, it just goes back to the same thing. If you don't have a solution or possible solution to a problem,
Yeah.
then you're just whining.
Right.
You're just complaining.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing about the Marine Corps too, that instilled in me. It's like, if you're going to, bitch, piss, and moan, you need to come with at least some kind of viable solution for that.
Right.
And that's what, basically what he's saying in that sense. But also the fact that it's like, hey, it's unfortunate that he had to go out into Lincoln County to get that done, when Spokane County should have helped him out.
Right.
It should have been an internal thing, but it didn't, because they both knew, oh, this is going to get silly here in Spokane County. Well, that's everything. But if I didn't do it and I just complained and I just, didn't do anything about like what we're doing,
right,
then I'm part of that system. That's just
part of the problem.
Yeah, I'm part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. My next question is for you is, do you believe that judges and commissioners should face legal consequences for violating our constitutional rights, especially in cases where the family courts are concerned, obviously, because this is what our podcast is about?
Well, that one gets into an area I probably can't talk about, because now you're talking about the legislature passing some laws. What I can say is there are certain things that are constitutionally already mandated, like the 90-day decision rule. I go back to, why does it take 90 days to actually decide that? I get when the Constitution, when that rule was initially passed, you're talking about, we're still on horseback a lot of the time. We're not talking about the current systems that we have up, and making a decision, giving a judge 90 days to make the decision was something that made more sense in the early 1900s than it does today, right? I also think about, like, if I have a trial that finishes January 17th, it's probably better for me to take my Saturday right after that, review the transcripts, and make my decision by Monday.
That makes sense. Fresh in your mind still on everything going on with the case. Yeah.
Yeah. But if it takes me until April 12th to get that decision out, now I've wasted more time by having to review more stuff, bring it back. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the freshness of what's in my mind. And I think honestly, scheduling time, this is something I do with my office staff all the time is okay, if we don't schedule a time for something to get done and we say, and for example, a defense attorney might call and say, hey, when you get a chance, let's talk about this. My staff is like, hey, they want to talk to you about this when you get a chance. I'm like, well, put it on my calendar, because if we don't put it on my calendar, there will never be a chance for that conversation to happen. And then that issue just gets kicked out, right? If you don't schedule a time for it, it doesn't happen. And so I personally think having the staff trained, now I'll only be able to focus on the staff in my own department, but maybe we can set an example of saying, if this happens, there is a moment in time where there's a decision-making appointment that comes up on my calendar. And that might be a Saturday or a Sunday, as you just pointed out. This concept of, what is it called? Work-life balance. I've never been in the military or at war, but I did have uncles who did. And my grandpa was wounded in World War II. And my son is actually, well, he's in the Army Reserves now and police officer in Post Falls. But this whole concept about being in a battle and taking a break, I'm just like, I mean, that's one of the things when they're running drills, they put them in those real world scenarios, to the extent one of his friends had his leg blown off doing the Bangalore, stuff down in Yakima. And, they play with real stuff, and yet we're in the court system, we're not honoring this whole concept. There is a real battle going on, a battle for people's lives. And
Right.
it is not the time to look for work-life balance when we're backed up, when we're 6,000 cases over where we should have been back before 2015, when there's that much backup in the system, when we're not in our constitutional balance in any area. We need to figure that out. That means Saturdays are at play, which is not unusual for me. I actually do client meetings on Saturdays. I'll do my preps, deposition preps. I'll do a lot. It's not unheard of. I mean, no, I say it's not unheard. I actually had a client one time, we were in trial, and she said, and we were staying at a different place, and she goes, I'm a little disappointed. I thought we'd get to have dinner and talk about the case at the end of the day, and then, in the morning have breakfast before we went to court. She's like, all you guys do is you get back and you're working on motions and everything, and then you're getting up at like 4 a.m. and you don't get to bed till midnight. You get up at 4 a.m. I'm like, that's what we do. I just don't understand why that goes away if you get on the bench. You're battling for people, our justice in our community. So I think those are the kinds of things that we need to make sure happen every day on the bench.
Yeah, it's a high stress job, and because you have people's lives in hands and other people's lives, just like in my case, these judges have that, and it's just like, nonchalant, laissez-faire attitude, like, oh well, he's all right, we'll just tack on another renewal of a protection order for one more year, and it's okay. He doesn't see his kid, he'll get over it, he'll man up.
Right. I mean, I don't even know what life balance is. I work my regular 9 to 5, and then as soon as I get off work, I'm coming here, contacting people, networking. I mean, putting all these shows together. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I do a therapeutic job at the VA, and I like it because I'm giving back to my fellow veterans and helping them. You know what I mean? At the same time, it's, I'm getting this money that's federally, legally, which is crazy, is a under the table job.
Okay.
So they pay me that to get back in, because prior to this, it was 14 years before I had, you know what I mean? And so, and that was due to PTSD, all that other stuff. So I could assimilate back into society and get that same mindset as them. But I know I never will, because somebody says like, you're hot. Ooh, God forbid you're hot, get back out there and push that pencil,
Right.
But, the thing is like, I can't do that. It's like, hey, hold on, guys, hold up on the fire.
Right.
We got to get lunchtime here, or something happened.
Yeah. Right.
Here, like I tell my attorneys and everything, and even like I tell you, my kids are my priority.
Right.
So, and I told my employer, this is like, listen, if they call for my kids and my attorney needs me right now to drive down there or something happened, I'm walking off the job.
Right.
My kids are more important than my job.
Yeah.
And so that's personal work-life balance because my kids are more important to me than anything I do.
Yeah, no, well, it's funny because as far as employees go, I mean, a lot of people that I've worked for, they're dads themselves that have gone through the family court system. So they're usually very understanding, like in my experience.
Yeah, and even to that fact is like I don't get that much. I mean it's kind of it's a stipend, so I get, you know, like roughly 2,600. 1,000 of each of those paychecks goes straight to my attorney.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then part of that, you know, I have to worry about my disability because, you know, part of that, at least 50% of my disability goes to my attorney to
Right.
keep up. So I want to pay ahead so that you know, because ultimately money motivates, but it's tough because it's like, you know, I got this case in federal court that's at Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have state court, and then I have tribal court. Tribal court's a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, you could read the term paralegal and probably beat them in tribal court. That's what a joke tribal court is. State court, you have to know this thing and get in there to be able to articulate this stuff as a pro se. And then federal court, I was like, man, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I got it at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So now I have to shop my case around to these attorneys who would love to go argue at Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals because I've got it this far.
Right.
You know, I had my friend, and he's an attorney, and he's been an attorney for 35 years. He's like, how the heck did you get that at Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals?
Yeah.
He's like, it's at a merits panel, right? And I go, yeah.
Yeah.
He goes, hey, give me the case number. He goes, I'll shop it around to these attorneys because they'll do that pro bono. And I was like, why is that? He said, well, because attorneys, he goes, they hardly ever get to argue in front of Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I was like, well, this is not a test case for him. I want, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
These are my children in my, you know, due
Yeah.
process and jurisdiction. I don't want, you know,
Yeah.
this is not, hey, I'm
not trying to help fluff up your resume.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so I can do that well better myself, and I got myself to blame, not anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hoping it comes out, and it's gone so far pro se good at federal level, but
yeah, he's really good with the law, Casey. This guy, you're training to be a lawyer right now, aren't you?
yes, sir. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
it
good.
takes money between forking out $3,000 a month to my attorney for the
Right.
past 2 years, and then trying to get those classes on. It's going to take me a while, but it'll be sweeter at the end. You know, I'm 50 years old, but it's I want to get it so that I can do it for low income families here in Spokane County free of charge. But I would rather do it, like I said, people think it's funny, but it's like a barter system with me. Like if they're a mechanic and they need help and I got a car, guess what? You're doing oil changes and tire checks and everything like that for me for a year to pay off your, you know, billable hours.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I don't want, you know,
Trade legal services
Yes,
for mechanical work.
yeah, you know, you pay for the filing fee and I will represent you in court. But, you know, I don't know. It's tough. That's all I want to do is for veterans and fathers. Those are my two priorities right there.
Casey, can you hang with us for a few more minutes? I got a couple more questions for you,
Absolutely.
then we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. Washington State is ranked 43rd in the nation for fathers' parental rights, and Spokane County is ranked last in Washington State. What do you do what do you propose to help address this situation, which is obviously having a negative impact on families?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of what we talked about previously.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put this out there. When we talk about right now, the judges being a little bit scared, and because I think this is the first time they've actually seen somebody who's going to probably have success at winning. You know, and
Yeah.
Winkle and I think it's interesting. Van Winkle and I didn't really know that we were in such a similar situation. What we were talking about, if that tells you anything, two people running. And why we were running, we didn't really know when we started running why that we merged up. It was, I think, out at the Cheney fair, we had booths next to each other, and I heard what he was talking to people about. He heard what I was talking to people about. We're like, hey, wait, we have about the same message going on here, you know?
Right.
And so we ended up having lunch, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks later, just because everything was so busy. But it's one of those things where I think the judges are a little bit concerned. And if we can get more attorneys now, Kyle, I'm glad that you're looking to become a lawyer because we need more lawyers for one. our system's really overburdened. And one of the problems that happens with that is you have lawyers that don't have to be as creative. So my dad came from a generation where there was high competition for lawyers, and I got a chance to see that. And then as the baby boomers have been retiring, there's been just this lack of attorneys in the system. I think we went from, there was about 1% of the population were attorneys. It's now down to 0.5%. And
Oh, wow.
so, yeah, it's a huge, when you think about how much representation can occur. Well, of course, if I have a corporate entity that's going to pay me, $500,000-$800,000 a year, why do I want to become a judge? Or why do I really want to take, a reasonable fee on family law? Or, I can go ahead because I've got 5 other clients that are going to replace you if you're not satisfied with my work. I can bill what I want to. You see what I'm saying? Is
Oh, yeah. Oh,
kind
yeah.
of the situation right now. And so, there is moral laziness that occurs too. You might have people that are normally moral, but you put them in certain circumstances and they get a little bit lazy with their morals, and that happens in all populations, including attorneys. And one of my problems is you also have, over the media over the last 30 years has made attorneys not look like moral people. So a lot of moral people who would want to become lawyers, like me, I had all these heroes about that were after justice. That was their primary concern. That's why I wanted to become a lawyer, because that's what I saw growing up, But now you have things like Suits or whatever, where it's not really the same type of, then you have a lot of people who are opting out. So I'm glad you're opting in, Kyle. And I think what we can do is just make sure that system is rewarded, and get more. And so kind of going back to the question here, I think as we have more good lawyers, and when I say good lawyers, it's not that we have bad people right now, but people who are looking for justice and looking to actually serve our community. That's why they're becoming lawyers. We have those people running. I think it starts to change the system. People start to perk up. And even if they were appointed, they're like, I could actually be, I could have somebody else be elected in my place if I don't start to change my ways,
Right.
So I think ability makes a difference.
I think if it's they follow the letter of the law, it's just like you have people that are going to like my service to others, even though I didn't know it in at that point in time. Later on in life, after 11 years being in the Marine Corps, I was like, I like doing that. I didn't join the Marine Corps because I was going to get a Montgomery GI Bill, or, because I looked cool in the uniform and, get all the ladies. No, I did it because I was 4th generation Marine.
Right.
I was carrying on that tradition. And then the second thing was because I was serving my country.
Right.
So the whole thing of doing that, if it's that later on coming to find out that's what it was service to others.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I didn't like bullies when I was growing up.
Right.
Well, Marine Corps takes care of bullies. Even though in all instances, sometimes you might not believe what your government, but you still have to uphold and defend the Constitution.
Right.
The thought of that stuff. And so when judges do that and they go in there with their heart and they have a passion for the law and passion primarily for the people first and putting them through the lens of the Constitution, and they're willing to do that, those people in the end are more, I think, they don't have an issue with their moral compass.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're there, if I was I wouldn't have stayed in the Marine Corps 11 years if I, getting paid at $30,000 a year,
right,
firing at people,
yeah, right,
living a hard life.
Yeah.
But I knew that's what I did, so I embraced it. So when you have gentlemen like Mr. Casey that do that and want to do that, versus, hey, I can go to Seattle and he could be a personal injury attorney over there, making 250 right out the gate.
Right.
1,000 meaning 250,000.
Yeah.
Total
and just be
different
lazy.
mentality.
Yeah.
If
that's okay with you, then that's fine. But that's where you have now it's become in the sense where and the same thing I think in the police force, you don't have anybody, there's no policing the police. They don't police each other. So
Right.
then the bad things happen. They happen. So the same thing with the judges. Then you got coming in here. You got 2 guys in here. Hey, wait, what are these guys doing? We don't listen to that stuff. We want discretion. You guys want law. We want discretion. No. That doesn't work with,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
You know, it's Saturday. Are you kidding me? It's 1 o'clock. I should be out with my kids. Well, you're the judge. You should be
You
studying
chose a
up.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So another question I got for you is in Washington State, the federal government, and this is actually all 50 states, matches the state's child support collections by 66 cents to the dollar through Title 4D. We believe this financial structure denies due process to families and children. Do you think the current financial incentives in our family courts lead to keeping fathers out of the homes?
Cody, I probably cannot answer that one, even though I might
Okay.
have personal views on it. There's things I shouldn't say, but let me say this. I believe there's a good reason our constitutions tend to try to limit the power of the government and the reach of the government, because I think, you look at Article 1, Section 1, it's about the only thing our government should be doing is trying to protect and maintain individual rights. And then
Right.
after that, each section's about essentially doing that. And you look even like criminal law. Well, that's about trying to protect people's rights to be safe or protect their property rights. That's why
Right.
police should step in to protect that person's rights. So I get really concerned when I see our government try to do something that they think is going to, maybe it's good-hearted and in their mind beneficial, whenever they create a program. But I tend to think that, there are agendas that can come behind those programs.
I agree.
And I
Yeah.
get worried about that stuff. So I always try to encourage people, please talk with your legislators about this stuff, because they're the ones who create those laws. And unfortunately, judges are put in the place where we have two things we can decide. How does that law get applied? And is that law constitutional? And so the in addition to stepping up and being judges, if you can't either decide one of those two things, and you're going to try to get into how much do I like that law, or how much do I think that law is appropriate, and I take it out of the hands of the legislature, well, then I probably should recuse myself, right? Because
Right.
that's the reason why people need to be voting for the representatives, the senators, that they want to make good laws. And I do definitely think there's a reason why and I'm saying this as a father, having 5 boys that went through the public education system. My sons were more educated by my ex-wife and I on the importance of certain things in our legal system, laws, how the House and Senate work, than I think happens elsewhere. I very distinctly sitting down with my kids and saying, okay, I'm sorry your teacher's teaching you that. That's actually not true. Let me take you through the truth. And it's
Right.
scary to me. And to add one more factor in, there's some encouragement for judges to actually get out there and talk with the public. In fact, each school is supposed to spend a week just talking about the Washington Constitution, and I'm not really sure that ever gets done. But I'll tell you what, as a judge, I'm going to be trying to give up some lunchtime to make sure I'm getting into those schools and teaching a few classes and saying, hey, here, let me come in and teach a class on the Washington Constitution, because it's one of the most beautiful constitutions across the nation. I am biased. I'm going to admit I'm biased, but I still think it's the best. And if you guys read Article 1, I can't see how anybody has a problem with it. It's best protections of your freedom of conscience, best protections on things like gun rights, has victims' rights in as part of it, requiring that victims do have the right to participate in the criminal justice system. The normal protections we would expect for anyone who's in the criminal system. It's amazing. You look at our Constitution and it's just said, hey, we're going to actually get away from some of the legalese, like the Second Amendment refers to the militia. Ours says, no, you just have the right to own guns to protect yourself and other people in the state. I mean, it's that clear, right? It's just,
yeah.
It's a fundamental
beautiful.
right.
Yeah.
Fundamental rights. It does touch on that Article 1, like the same thing. It's, I don't know. It's just amazing reading that stuff.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you don't have to answer this one, but there was a poll done by the Bar Association, and they basically concluded that you and Van Winkle are the most unfit when it comes to, yeah, Poland, and I think what Fennessy is who Van Winkle's going against.
Well, they did the same thing. I think.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might as well just lump them in. Anderson, Poland,
Right.
See, all those guys are.
Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, well, let me give you the context of that polling, right? Okay.
Okay.
So then the percentage of people who respond to that poll that is sent out is pretty small. Okay.
Okay.
And so that's a major factor. So it really becomes a lobbying effort behind the scenes to get people to respond. But I remember asking a couple of people who were actually came to me and asked me to run for judge. And I said, hey, did you turn in the poll? And they're like, no, I didn't even see it in my email.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
I don't even know. What I can say is the 12 people that actually interviewed me, when that poll was weighted in, I still got well qualified,
I love it.
So,
yeah.
So even with what happened in that polling process, and my guess is there was just a better lobbying. I am not the best lobbyist for myself because I feel like there's pressuring people into doing something that I'd rather people just jump in and do it on their own, So
Yeah.
I try not to get out there. And I mean, it's just one of those things that's about me. It's like, I feel like self-promotion is just not one of my strong points. I don't advertise. I just recently put up a website because I was told by people, nobody's going to believe you really own a law office unless you actually have a website. And I'm like, but we've spent 20 some years, having so many potential clients that just come from word of mouth referrals that I don't get out there and promote. I don't have that billboards or anything. So that's just my 20-year habit. Unfortunately, I didn't do a very good job in lobbying on that email. That's probably my perspective on it, is could have done a better job getting out there lobbying.
That's all right. We're here to help lobby for you.
And that's the thing. So one of the things I was telling you about, I don't care about my reputation,
Right.
Because that's something that somebody else gives me.
Right.
I care about my character.
Yep.
And if I deviate from my character, then obviously they're going to be right, and then my reputation is going to be right.
Well, and I think a lot of that is what brought you and I together, besides our kids, is we're just both very, very hard-headed about doing what's right, and we really don't care who we kind of piss off.
Well, yeah, it's being aggressive and being assertive, and that's what Mr. Casey's doing. It. He's just doing it. I don't want to say subtly, but he's doing it more in a steady manner.
Right.
And it's scaring these people.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what I'm saying. It's scaring these people because now you're bucking the system. But again, if somebody is in this case, like they're doing this polling, it's the same thing. If you and I had a debate, you try to overtalk me, condescend me, or personally attack me in the sense of through words, I know I'm winning the fight if those three things are happening with you. Well, people don't look and read between the lines. Like, well, what are they doing with this polling thing? Who cares? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's like I say, I don't care if the devil is our president, as long as he's doing it for the United States and nobody else. You know what I mean? In a sense.
All right, Casey. So this is it right here. My final question is where where can the people find you?
Yeah.
Like, your social media presence, website, any of the stuff. Yeah, where can people find you at?
Okay. If you go to caseyforcourt.com, should have all the links there. I actually put up some recent YouTube videos talking about some of these issues as well. Honestly, because as I got out there, and I'm just going to give you a quick snippet here. When I started, people said, Brandon, it's too boring what you're talking about. People aren't going to care. But as I was out there actually talking to people about essentially what you guys have heard me mention time and time again, I found people actually were very responsive. And so put up some YouTube videos as well about that. And it actually been very encouraged by the fact that people aren't bored by that stuff. And so you can go to caseyforcourt.com, get the website. Again, going back to not good at promoting myself, I do have a Facebook. I think it's just called Casey for Court
Okay.
on Facebook. We do have Instagram and X, so they can find me there by just looking for Casey for Court, which is spelled
Okay.
CASEYFORCOURT.
And we'll make sure we put all those links in the description for
We'll
the
make-
video and all that good stuff and get it out there.
You know, and folks, make sure you look this gentleman up. Don't just go based off of, whatever I drove down the street and I saw 20 fantasy signs or 20 Poland signs
Right.
versus 5 Casey signs. Oh, it must means he's better. This is not high school, folks. Do your research, look this gentleman up. I'm sure he's pretty open to answering questions off his Facebook or things like that. But people have to do these research into these candidates.
Right. Yeah.
And so
And I'll add one more thing in there. You can call my office 509-252-9700, which is also the number on the website. I've actually taught, what happens is you call in, I do work. So I have meetings and things scheduled, but they'll schedule a time for me to call you back. And whether that's even in the evenings or early mornings, whatever works, to make sure, because I've actually been talking to anyone who's willing to call in. I'm going to honor that and talk to you about it.
That's huge, folks. How many people do you
go.
know, are willing to do what he just said right there? I mean, give this man a call, hit up his Facebook page, YouTube, all that good stuff. So.
And it goes down to it. It boils down to the foundational thing that it sounds to me without him saying it. It's like he's a public servant once he gets in that position.
Right,
so
right.
It should be that way.
Right.
It shouldn't be like pulling teeth in order to get to our elected officials.
Right.
You know what I
And
mean?
I love that because you do give the way you explain the way you talk and the way you explain yourself. It seems very apparent that in this role you are a public servant. And I mean, I think we need to stop calling people politicians and all that stuff. Let's call them what they are. You're a public servant. You work for we the people.
Yes.
It's time to remind you.
Yep.
And folks, listen to it. It's straight from the source. It's not coming from Kyle and Cody.
Yep.
He gave the phone number. So please, even if it's maybe you're not happy with him because he had a beard last month and now he doesn't have a beard, whatever the case may be, but please ask the questions before you start sitting there, because November 5th is coming right around the corner.
Yep.
And I would absolutely love to see these two gentlemen in there, even though they can't do my case. And, it's not a buddy system in there. I believe that these two gentlemen are the best for those positions out of the 13.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah. Casey, Van Winkle, you guys are the people we need in there. So
Thank you.
And before we get out of here, will you please let Jill know that I appreciate all her communication, and she's fantastic. You're fantastic, and we just appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will. Jill is amazing, isn't she? She's does a good job.
She's definitely amazing. So we appreciate her. Well, Mr. Casey, thank you, man, for joining us. We greatly appreciate you, man. You did almost an hour and a half, 2-hour interview with us. So you're awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck. I know it's going to work out if we do this. It's not a will thing. I think it's a choice that people want, and they're tired of the system. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Rob Chase is going to go in there, and I like him because of his thoughts. Mr. Van Winkle's going to go in there because I like where he's coming from. Mr. Casey's coming in there because, we like what he's got to say. And I don't think it's a load of crap that those three individuals are, you know what I mean?
Time to drain that local swamp.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, we'll let
Thank
you
you,
go. Yep, thanks. You have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
God bless.
Good one.
Bye.